Hi everyone, welcome to this tutorial on externalities and some public goods. In this tutorial, I'm going to go over different statements. I will go over a simple problem of two people living together and see how quotient bargaining can lead to a Pareto efficient allocation. Then I will cover the case of externalities with a graph. And finally, I will talk about the provision of a public good in a neighborhood. So, first question is true, false, or uncertain. If property rights are assigned to the recipient of a negative or a positive externality, then the source of the externality may want to bribe the recipient to allow more or less of the externality being produced. So first of all, the recipient of the externality is the bystander. He is the person who is going to either suffer or benefit from the transaction or the activity of the source of the externality. Now, if the recipient has the property rights, then he is the one who makes the rules. Because he's the one making the rules, he can require that less or more of the externality is going to happen depending on whether it is negative or positive. In a case like that, then the source of the externality, who doesn't have the property rights, would like to consume or produce to his satisfaction. So he might want to either bribe or simply to just negotiate and bargain to be allowed to produce or consume more of the good that generates the bad externality or less of the good that generates good externalities. The idea is that if it's a good that generates negative externalities, the recipient will require less of it to be consumed or produced by the source. So the source might bribe the recipient so that he can produce or consume more, because this is what maximizes his individual utility or profit. On the other hand, if the externality is positive, then the recipient of the externality might require a higher consumption or production of the good than what the source of the externality wishes to consume or produce. Then he might bribe the recipient of the externality to be able to produce or consume less of it. Imagine two roommates. One of them is a smoker, the other one is not, but has the property rights. This is the case here. So the smoker is the source of the negative externality. So the smoker will bribe his roommate to be allowed to smoke in the apartment. If the externality is positive, it's the other way around. If I have the right to determine how much gardening my neighbor has to do, for instance, I am likely to order too much of this activity since I don't bear any of the cost and I enjoy the view. So my neighbor may want to bribe me so that I allow him to do less garden work. Note that here we talk about bribing, but it is pretty much the same as bargaining. It is just agreeing on an amount of money that corresponds to either the decrease or the increase in the quantity of a good being consumed or produced. Now, let's take another simple setup where we have two roommates, Gao Lang and Sao Peng. They live together, and as things are right now, Sao Peng derives a utility of $250 per month, measured in dollars, from cooking crazy spicy meals. So he cooks very spicy meals, gets utility from that. However, it bothers his roommate, Gao Lang, who experiences this utility from having to smell the cooking fumes, equal to $350 per month. So you can imagine that if Xiaopeng produces or cooks spicy meals, his utility is equal to plus 250. But if he cooks spicy meals, then the utility of Gaolang is equal to minus 350. Because currently Xiaopeng is cooking spicy meals, Gaolang is contemplating moving out, in which case both would have to be renting a more expensive rent elsewhere, and this more expensive rent represents $200 more per person. So we have two situations here. Either Xiaopeng cooks, they live together, he cooks, he gets a utility of 250, but Gaolang gets a disutility of 350, or Gaolang moves out, they live separately. Xiaopeng can cook spicy meals, so he gets his utility of 250, but he has to pay $200 more in rent, so his net utility is $50. And Gaolang moved out, is happy because he doesn't have to bear the cooking fumes, but he has to pay an additional rent, so his utility was at zero because he doesn't have to smell cooking fumes anymore, minus 200 because of the new rent, so his net utility would be minus 200. Argue carefully that the current situation, where they live together and Xiaopeng cooks his meals, is not Pareto optimal. To show that an allocation is not Pareto optimal, we need to find a counterexample. We need to find an allocation that makes one agent better off without making the other agent worse off. So let's think about another allocation that would make them at least one of them better off, but none of them worse off. Well, for instance, they could keep living together, but Gaolang could pay Xiaopeng every month, so Xiaopeng doesn't cook spicy meals. Since the disutility of Gaolang is higher than the utility of Xiaopeng, Gaolang can compensate Xiaopeng for the loss in utility if he cannot cook spicy meals. For instance, Gaolang could give Xiaopeng $300 a month and tell him, I give you this money, but you do not cook spicy meals. The net utility of Xiaopeng would be 0 because he doesn't cook spicy meals anymore, plus 300 because he gets the money from Gaolang. So his utility is now higher. 300 from not cooking spicy meals but being compensated is higher than a utility of $250. So this allocation at least makes Xiaopeng better off. Does it make Gaolang better off as well? Well, if Gaolang compensates Xiaopeng $300, his utility is going to decrease by $300. But at the same time, he doesn't have to smell the cooking fumes anymore. So his net utility now will be 0 minus 300, so minus 300. This is higher than the case where Xiaopeng cooks spicy meals and Gaolang experiences a disutility of $350. So Gaolang in this case would be better off by $50, and Xiaopeng would also be better off by $50. So we can find another allocation that is better than the current one, at least one. Therefore, the current allocation is not Pareto optimal. I said that there is at least one because Gaolang could give $251 to Xiaopeng, and Xiaopeng is better off not cooking spicy meals. So he doesn't have to pay him $300, he can pay him just $251, or exactly $250, so that Xiaopeng is neither better off nor worse off. Gaolang definitely will be better off if he pays less than $350 and nobody cooks spicy meals in the apartment. So here we can find more Pareto improving allocations. One was enough to prove that the status quo is not Pareto efficient. In light of the Coase theorem, what do you expect to happen? Explain. Coase theorem says that agents can reach a Pareto efficient allocation if bargaining is possible. So, what will happen, according to the Coase theorem, is the Pareto optimal allocation, or one of them. The Pareto optimal allocation is that both live together and Xiaopeng doesn't cook. Given the status quo where Xiaopeng cooks spicy meals, Gaolang can compensate Xiaopeng anything between $250 and $350 for Xiaopeng to not cook. Why this range? Because more than $250 is needed to make Xiaopeng better off if he doesn't cook, so he would agree if he gets paid more than $250. But less than $350, because if it's more than $350, then Gaolang prefers to smell the cooking fumes. So more than $250 and Xiaopeng will accept the deal. Less than $350 and Gaolang will accept the deal as well. And both will be made better off. Note that the result also depends on the outside option. What we mean by the outside option is the utility each of them will get respectively after moving out. If moving out did not imply such a high disutility, which is minus 200 for each, it might be Pareto efficient to move out. Note also that the allocation where both live separately is not Pareto efficient, as moving in together with Xiaopeng not cooking spicy meals is an improvement for both if they can find the right amount of transfer. Imagine, for instance, that they are living separately. If they are living separately, Xiaopeng's utility is now equal to $50. He cooks spicy meals, so he gets a utility of $250, but he pays extra rent, so it's $250 minus $200, which is equal to $50. Gaolang, if he lives alone, experiences a utility of minus $200. So, if Gaolang gives more than $50 to Xiaopeng, Xiaopeng accepts. If Gaolang proposes less than 200, he also wants this bargaining process to go through. And the deal is Xiaopeng doesn't cook. So Xiaopeng would be better off because he gets back with Gaolang, but his utility is bigger than before, is bigger than 50. Gaolang is also happier because he gets to move in with Xiaopeng, doesn't have to pay the extra $200 of rent, doesn't get to smell the cooking fumes, so his utility would at least be equal to 200, which is the utility he had when he was alone. Or rather, minus 200. So, whether the status quo is that they are living together and Xiaopeng cooks, or they live separately, the bargaining process can always lead to the Pareto efficient allocation where they live together and Xiaopeng doesn't cook. As mentioned in the lecture, quotient bargaining is particularly convenient when only a small number of agents are involved in the activity and the implied externalities. Quotient bargaining will not be implementable in the case where somebody purchases gasoline to drive his car. Then he would have to compensate every person in the street that he passes by with his car, and he would have to every time bargain a certain amount until they are okay with that. With a small number of actors, typically it could be roommates, it could be friends, it could be a city council asking a city council and a factory in a small town, and so on and so forth. Quotient bargaining can lead to the Pareto efficient allocation. Now, give an example of a good or a service that has positive consumption externality and show the implied deadweight loss on a graph. The same way I went through a negative production externality in the lecture, I will now go over a positive consumption externality. An example, vaccines. They are goods with positive consumption externalities because consuming the vaccines for some disease reduces the exposure of other agents to the disease. The positive side effect is not reflected by the price of vaccines. Those who get the vaccine are not being compensated for the benefits they create around them, for the positive impact they have on others. So too few vaccines are being consumed, in the sense that the equilibrium quantity is too low compared to the socially optimal level. Now let's compare the socially efficient equilibrium with the market equilibrium. The first graph shows the socially efficient equilibrium, where both social marginal curves cross. They cross at P star Q star, which is the price quantity couple that maximizes total surplus. The producer surplus is indicated in red. This is the red area. And the consumer surplus is represented by the blue triangle. Note that here the social marginal benefit is higher than the private marginal benefit. The social marginal benefit adds all the different utilities, all the different marginal utilities, whereas the private marginal benefit represents the marginal utility of the source of the externality. When taking into account not only his utility but the benefit on others, the social marginal benefit is higher than the private marginal benefit. If you do not intervene on this market and leave the market reach its own equilibrium, you're going to end up with a price PM and a quantity QM. What's going to happen here is an individual agent will not internalize the positive impact the vaccine has on people around him, and so not as many vaccines at equilibrium will be purchased. The consumer surplus will be represented by the blue area all the way to QM and down to PM. The producer surplus is now going to be smaller because the price, in fact, is smaller. And adding those two areas and comparing with the two areas from the previous graph, we see that the difference is going to be equal to this triangle here. This will be the deadweight loss. What can the government do to restore the socially efficient equilibrium via a market mechanism? The government can, for instance, subsidize the purchase of vaccines. The government can give a certain amount of money per vaccine being purchased. The amount of the subsidy should be equal to the difference between the social marginal benefit and the private marginal benefit at the socially efficient quantity. This way, the private marginal benefit is going to shift upwards by that amount, because every time they get the vaccine, not only agents will experience some utility, but also they will receive additional money from the government. This way, the new market equilibrium will be where the private marginal benefit, the new private marginal benefit, augmented by the subsidy, crosses the social marginal cost at exactly the socially efficient quantity and price. Note that using a quota here would be hard to implement. A quota would be such as a rule, like a minimum amount of vaccines that everybody has to purchase. It is something that is pretty hard to enforce, as opposed to a quota from the top, where you limit the maximum amount of things that can be produced or consumed. Setting up a market for rights to use a vaccine or to sell the vaccine will also not really work here, as vaccine is a 1-0 decision. It is not about I choose to get 4 vaccines over 3 vaccines. It is, do I need this vaccine or not? In the case of the COVID-19 pandemic, vaccine shots have been made free by most North American governments and Western countries, so that people will decide to get the vaccine as soon as they can. Now, let's move on to a public good problem. In the beautiful location of Capitol Hill in Barnaby, neighbors are considering getting garbage collection for big items and electronics that don't go in the regular garbage bin. Things such as computers, TV screens, couches, and so on. Those items are not being picked up by the current garbage collection system. So the Neighbors Council finds that the required amount of dollars to get a monthly collection can be paid by K contributions of the same amount of dollars. So imagine that if K people contribute that amount, that's enough to pay for monthly garbage collection. The council doesn't want to make contributions mandatory. Rather, they are going to make those contributions voluntary. Anyway, I don't think the council will have any way to enforce mandatory contributions. They are more than K neighbors. They are more than K neighbors, but the contribution system is not very efficient. If the amount of contributions does not exceed the cost of getting the garbage collection, the money is lost. No one gets it back. So there's a chance that you contribute, but you don't see the result of your contribution because not enough people contributed overall. If contributions exceed the cost, all of them are used to pay for garbage collection. No money left on the table. Now, assume that the neighbors have the following preferences. Their preferred option is to have garbage collection without contributing, of course. They don't pay for anything, but when they need to throw something away, they can do so because the garbage collectors will come on a monthly basis. They also do prefer contributing and having garbage collection rather than not contributing and not getting it. So if they're told that their contribution matters and it's going to be like they need this contribution to get garbage collection, then they will prefer to do that rather than saying no. The worst option is they contribute, but there is no garbage collection that happens because not enough contributions were gathered. Is there an instance where a neighbor strictly prefers to contribute rather than not? Given the neighbor's preferences, there is. Imagine that k-1 neighbors are already contributing. Then, all the neighbors who do not contribute will strictly prefer to do so. Why? Because if they know or if they think that they are k-1 people already, they will be the last piece of the puzzle. They will be the last contribution needed to get garbage collection. So if they are k-1 contributions, they want to contribute to make sure garbage collection happens. Now, if there are already k contributions, so k other people are already contributing, then somebody who doesn't contribute doesn't want to contribute. It doesn't regret not contributing because garbage collection is going to happen no matter what. So they are going to get it for free. They can free ride on garbage collection. Now, if they are less than k-1 contributions, one additional contribution will not be enough to get garbage collection. It will not be enough because if there are less than k-1 contributions, one additional contribution will add up to less than k contributions. So not enough to get garbage collection. Note, by the way, that if they are k-1 contributions already, since the ones who don't contribute now have an incentive to do so, it might be the case that more than one of these people will contribute, and more than k contributions will happen at the end of the day. If it's more than what's needed, then there is some kind of waste. You could make at least someone better off by telling him, take your contribution back, we don't need it, we have what we need. We already have what we need. So this sounds like a coordination problem. All the ones who don't contribute want to contribute, but only one extra contribution is needed, not two, or not more than two. So any extra contribution on top of that one would be inefficient. That person could keep her contribution for herself, be better off, and garbage collection still happens. Assume now that neighbors have all kinds of preferences that the council is not aware of. So the preferences I talked about before, that they prefer garbage collection by contributing than no garbage collection and no contribution, all those things. Imagine that now they differ across neighbors. The council only knows that getting garbage collection is overall Pareto efficient. It doesn't know exactly what everybody's utility is, but overall it knows that it will be Pareto efficient to make garbage collection happen. So it should be organized one way or another. What is the problem with the mechanism proposed above? The one where the provision of the garbage collection will happen through private contributions. Each neighbor, the same day, puts some money in a jar. Nobody else, well, or not, but nobody else knows whether other neighbors contributed or not. What is the problem, and how can garbage collection be implemented? The problem is, if preferences are known, chances are that asking for willingness to pay will not help implement garbage collection. Many neighbors might lie about how much they are willing to pay in order to free ride on other people's contributions. So they will likely underreport their true valuation of garbage collection. Voluntary contributions might be limited due to the free rider problem. Under provision, under contributions, so garbage collection might not happen. So this method of letting people choose whether they want to contribute or not will not work in a case like that, or it's not likely to work. In order to make garbage collection happen, neighbors might need to be forced to contribute one way or another. For instance, taxation could be a way. The neighborhood council could collect a tax every month or every year from the neighbors and could say, we are collecting those taxes to do some renovation work in the neighborhood, maybe plant a couple of trees, maybe renovate the sidewalk, and we are going to use this money for garbage collection as well. The same way a government does to fund public infrastructure. They use this money to invest in hospitals, public schools, roads, railroads, bridges, and so on and so forth. They also use this to maintain parks. That's why you have the City of Vancouver employees every now and then that you can see mow the lawn or cut trees in some neighborhoods and so on. They are paid by the local taxes so that the government, or in this case, the City of Vancouver, can take care of the city. The same with fireworks. The City of Vancouver pays for the fireworks on Canada Day because private contributions are likely to be too small relative to the Pareto efficient amount. Is it doable though? Can a neighborhood council impose a tax on its neighbors? That's another issue. But if it was possible, that would be a way to fund garbage collection. Okay, so let me summarize the overall tutorial and lecture. Externalities and public goods are two instances where the market equilibrium will fail to be Pareto efficient for two different reasons. When we talk about externalities, the problem is that agents do not factor in the impact of their activity or their transaction on bystanders, on third parties. So they do not realize that their transaction, their market decision is going to increase or decrease the utility of people around them. Because of that, they usually do not produce or consume the Pareto efficient amount of the good. In general, it's going to be too much of the good that generates negative externalities because they don't take into account the negative impacts on others, or too little of the goods that generate positive externalities because they do not take into account the benefits that others experience from their decision. Because the market equilibrium is not Pareto efficient anymore, there is going to be a deadweight loss. But the situation can be fixed using different tools. The government can, for instance, tax goods that generate bad externalities or subsidize goods that generate positive externalities. This is the case of Pigovian tax and Pigovian taxes and subsidies. The government could also set some quotas, in particular when too much of the bad good is being produced or consumed. The government could set a limit on the amount of units that can be sold or produced in order to get closer to the socially efficient quantity. Another way would be to pretty much set up a market for the actual externality. In the case of, for instance, producers of cars, there is a cap and trade system where firms have a certain amount of units they are allowed to pollute. Any unit, any amount they want to pollute which goes beyond this limit, they would have to purchase those rights from another firm who is willing to sell them. Not only it would give incentives to firms to adopt a greener technology, because they can use their spare units to increase their profits, they can resell them, but also it now puts a price on the external damage. It puts a price on pollution. Cohesion bargaining is another way to solve the problem of externalities, but it usually works in small samples. It works with a small number of agents. It is easier to bargain with 1 or 2 people than 100. There are cases where cohesion bargaining can fail, in particular when property rights are not correctly assigned, not clearly assigned, when there are transaction costs, such as the cost of bargaining. Not everybody enjoys bargaining. That also implies a disutility. How to enforce an agreement. It could be that an agreement is signed, but the other party doesn't respect his part of the agreement. They might need to hire a third party, which incurs additional costs, and so on. In the case of public good, there is some sort of externality in the sense that everybody consumes the same amount of the public good. A public good is non-rival and non-excludable. Non-rival because the use by one agent doesn't affect the use by other agents. So the use of the good is not rival between customers. And it's not excludable if it cannot, if the consumption of that good cannot exclude any consumer. Consumers cannot be excluded from consuming the good. We talked about air, national defense, lighthouses, parks, nature as examples of public goods. We went over different cases of goods where they are rival and excludable. That's the case of a private good, your own food, your own clothing. We went over cases of non-excludable goods but rival. That would be the case of some natural resources like timber, coal, and so on. Those are also called common pool resources. Some goods are non-rival but they are excludable. We call them club goods. Any goods or any service that you can access through a membership. Once you pay that membership, you can access that public good, and everybody who paid for the membership can equally enjoy the good. One issue with the provision of public goods is that why would one private person purchase a public good knowing that everybody is going to enjoy the good equally? They might think, well, why would I pay for it when everybody is going to enjoy it? Why don't I enjoy it for free and let somebody else pay for it? So private provision of public goods will, in general, be a problem. Agents have incentives to free ride on other people's contributions because their utility increases in other people's contributions. So their best strategy is to contribute as little as possible and free ride on other people who are incurring the costs. But if everybody thinks this way, not enough contributions are being made and the public good will be provided in a too low amount, under provision of the public good. The government can step in and say, if you guys want to contribute enough privately, we are going to fund the provision of the public good, the efficient provision of the public good, but we are going to fund this through taxation, and we're going to force you guys to contribute via taxes, one among other ways. Voting could be a way to provide the public good. In our last exercise, the city's council could operate a vote. Voting, however, does not always lead to the efficient allocation either. There are other mechanisms that can lead to an efficient provision of the public good. In general, those rules always come with one or two caveats. So in practice, there is no one best way to provide the public good. That's it for this tutorial on externalities and public goods. Have a good rest of your week, and see you in the next one. Bye.